Martha's hands trembled as she held the photograph, the one she'd found tucked inside his saddlebag, creased and worn from being touched too many times. Her voice came out raw, broken by 3 years of loneliness she thought was ending. "You knew him. You knew my husband." The man she'd fallen for, the man who'd mended her fence, shared her table, held her through the nightmares, stood frozen in the doorway. His face had gone pale as winter snow. Not the confusion of an innocent man, the pallor of guilt. "Martha, let me explain." "Don't." Her word cut the air like a blade. "Don't you dare speak his name with the same mouth that kissed me." The photograph trembled in her grip. Her late husband Daniel, standing beside a younger version of the man before her. Both in cavalry uniforms, both smiling. Brothers in arms, the kind of bond forged in blood and battlefield smoke. She watched something crumble behind his eyes, watched him realize she'd pieced it together. The way he'd appeared in her life exactly 3 years after Daniel's death. The way he knew which floorboard creaked. The way he'd turned away when she mentioned the war. "You were there. The day he died, you were there." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every lie, every tender moment built on a foundation of ash. Every time she'd thank God for bringing her a second chance at love, never knowing that chance wore the face of her greatest grief. He took 1 step toward her, hand outstretched. She took 2 steps back. "Did you pull the trigger yourself, or just watch him fall?" The lamp flickered again, and in that uncertain light, she saw the answer written in his tears before he could speak it. Now you might be sitting there, heart pounding like hoofbeats on hard ground, asking yourself what kind of twisted fate brings a woman face to face with her own tragedy dressed up as redemption. But here's the question that really matters. If the man who destroyed your past came back offering you a future, and your heart had already said yes before your mind knew the truth, what would you do? Would you hold tight to the love that grew in the ruins, or would you let justice speak louder than the heart that beats in your chest? Because the frontiers taught us one hard lesson over and over. Sometimes the only thing more painful than losing someone is finding out why.
3 years before that lamp-lit confrontation, Martha had been a different woman. She'd waited by the window every evening for a husband who'd ridden off to war, promising to return. The letters came regular at first, Daniel's handwriting looping across pages that smelled like campfire smoke and hope. Then the letter stopped. Then came the officer with his hat in his hands and his eyes on his boots. "Mrs. Brennan, your husband fell with honor. Ambush outside Fort Davis. He died quickly, ma'am. Didn't suffer." Those words were supposed to comfort her. Instead, they became the prison she lived in. A cell built of questions no one could answer. How quickly? Did he call for her? Was he afraid? She learned to survive in the silence, learned to run the ranch alone, learned to sleep through the empty spaces in the bed, learned to stop setting 2 plates at the table. The desert had a way of teaching you what you could endure when you had no choice. Then came the stranger. He'd appeared last spring, leading a lame horse, asking only for water and maybe some grain if she could spare it. She'd seen drifters before. They usually moved on quick, carrying their secrets like saddlebags they couldn't set down. But this one stayed. Fixed the corral gate that had been hanging crooked for 2 years. Noticed the roof leak she'd been meaning to patch. Spoke soft to the horses like he understood their language. "Name's James," he had told her, and she'd heard something careful in how he said it, like a man testing ice before stepping on it. "You running from something, James?" "No, ma'am. Running towards something, maybe. Or trying to." She'd let him stay on, told herself it was practical, that she needed the help, that his wages were fair trade for labor. But somewhere between the shared coffee at dawn and the way he'd laugh at her stories about the stubborn cattle, something shifted. She'd catch herself watching him work, admiring the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, noticing how his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The guilt came fast. How could she think of another man when Daniel's memory was all she had left? But James had a way of making her remember she was alive. He'd bring her wildflowers for no reason except that they were pretty. He'd sit with her on the porch after supper, not pressing for conversation, just sharing the quiet. And when the nightmares came, the ones where she heard gunshots and Daniel's voice calling her name, James held her without questions, without judgment, just steady and present until the shaking stopped. "You don't have to carry it alone," he'd whispered one night. "Whatever weight you're holding, Martha, you don't have to carry it alone." She'd fallen for him slowly, then all at once, the way a riverbank gives way after months of water wearing it down. And when he'd finally kissed her under the cottonwood tree, she'd let herself believe that maybe the frontier gave second chances after all. But James carried weight of his own. She'd see it sometimes, in the way he'd stare at nothing, lost in thoughts he never shared, in how he'd flinch at loud noises, in the way he'd avoid town, always finding reasons to stay on the ranch when she went for supplies. "You ever going to tell me what you're running from?" she'd ask him once. "I'm not running anymore. I found what I was looking for." She thought he meant her. Thought she was the answer to whatever question had been haunting him. She'd been half right. The truth started unraveling the day she needed his spare saddle blanket. She'd gone to his saddlebag without thinking. They'd shared everything by then, or so she believed.
Her hands had gone numb. She'd stared at that image until the faces blurred, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. James had known Daniel, had fought beside him, and he'd never said a word. The rest of the day passed in a fog. She'd cooked supper, her mind racing. She'd smiled when James came in from mending fence, even as her heart hammered questions against her ribs. She'd waited until after dark, until they were alone with just the lamp between them. Then she'd lay that photograph on the table like a card in a poker game that would decide everything, and watched her future and her past collide. "I didn't know how to tell you," James said, his voice breaking. "I came here to... God, Martha, I came here to tell you the truth about that day, to give you the answers you deserved. But then I saw you, saw how strong you'd become, how you'd survived what should have broken you, and I couldn't... What? Couldn't tell me you knew my husband? Couldn't mention you were there when he died? Couldn't leave." The words came out like a confession. "I was supposed to tell you everything and ride away, let you have peace. But I fell in love with you, Martha. I fell in love with you, and I became the worst kind of coward." She felt her world tilting. "What truth, James? What happened to Daniel?" He sank into the chair, head in his hands, and then he told her. They'd been pinned down, he said. Confederate ambush in a box canyon. No way out. Ammunition running low. Daniel had been right beside him when the order came. Retreat. Every man for himself. Those who can make it out should run. But James had taken a bullet through the leg. Couldn't stand. Couldn't ride. Daniel came back for me, he whispered. Everyone else ran, but he came back. Dragged me toward the horses while bullets hit the dirt around us. We almost made it, Martha. We were 10 feet from the horses when... His voice broke. When what? When I told him to leave me, told him to save himself. He wouldn't listen, said he'd made you a promise to come home, but he'd made me a promise too. No man left behind. So he stayed, kept dragging me forward while I bled and begged him to go. He looked up at her then, his face ravaged. He got me on a horse, got me out of that canyon, saved my life, Martha. And while he was tying me into the saddle so I wouldn't fall, that's when the bullet found him. Sniper on the ridge, one shot. He fell right there beside me, and I couldn't do a damn thing except watch him die and feel my horse carry me to safety. The cabin seemed to shrink around them. Martha couldn't breathe. He didn't die quickly, James continued. And now the truth poured out like blood from a wound that never healed. The officer lied to spare you. Daniel lived long enough for me to hold him, long enough to ask me for one thing. What thing? Martha's voice was barely a whisper. He asked me to find you, to tell you he loved you, to make sure you were okay. James's tears fell freely now. He died saving me, and I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to live with that, trying to figure out how to face the woman whose husband gave his life for mine. Martha stood there, the photograph still in her hands, her whole world rewritten. The anger that had burned so hot just moments ago was transforming into something more complicated. Grief, yes, but also understanding, also pain, also love. So you came here, she said, to tell me, to tell you, to honor his last request, to make sure you were surviving. He stood, keeping his distance. But I stayed for the wrong reasons, Martha. I stayed because being near you made me feel less guilty, made me feel like maybe I could repay the debt I owed him by taking care of what he loved most. And then I fell in love with you, and everything got twisted up in ways I never intended. You used me. The words came out hollow. No, his response was fierce. I loved you. I love you. But I built that love on a lie, and there's no forgiveness for that. There's no making this right. Martha looked down at the photograph again, at Daniel's smile, at James's youth, at 2 men who had no idea what fate had in store. Did he suffer? She asked quietly. No, I held him. He wasn't alone. Did he say anything else? He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded letter, edges soft from years of handling. He asked me to write down what he said, in case I forgot, in case I couldn't say it right. She took the letter with shaking hands, unfolded it, read her husband's last words in James's handwriting. Tell Martha I kept my promise. I'm coming home, just not the way we planned. Tell her the last thing I saw was her face in my mind, smiling like she did on our wedding day. Tell her to not stop living. Tell her to find love again, because she has too much heart to keep it locked away. And tell her I'm not afraid. I'm not alone. I'm with the best man I know, and he'll carry my love to her when I can't. The letter blurred. Martha's tears fell on ink that was 3 years old, on words from a dead man who'd loved her enough to let her go.
The lamp burned low between them as Martha set the letter down beside the photograph. 2 pieces of paper that changed everything. "You should have told me," she said finally. "From the beginning." "I know." "You should have trusted me with the truth instead of deciding what I could handle." "I know." "And you should have told me that you loved me before I gave you my heart." James's voice cracked. "I know." Martha stood there, caught between the life she'd built on Daniel's memory and the love she'd found in James's arms. Both were real. Both mattered. And both were now stained with deception, even if that deception had come from a place of pain. "I need you to leave," she said. He nodded, not surprised. "I'll be going by morning." "No. Leave now, tonight, before I change my mind." Because she could feel herself wavering, could feel the pull of forgiveness tugging against the anchor of betrayal. And she needed to know which one would win without him standing there making it harder. James gathered his things without a word, saddled his horse in the dark, and before he rode away, he stopped at the porch where she stood watching. "Your husband was the best man I ever knew, and you were the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I didn't deserve it. I'm sorry, Martha, for all of it." Then he was gone, hoofbeats fading into the frontier night. Martha stood alone under the stars, the same stars that watched Daniel die, that had seen her grief, that had witnessed her second chance at love and its unraveling. She held Daniel's letter in one hand and her own heart in the other, trying to figure out which one to follow. And here's what the frontier taught her that night. Love doesn't erase grief. It doesn't replace what was lost or make betrayal hurt less. But love also doesn't follow the rules we think it should. It doesn't wait for the right time or the right person or the right circumstances. It grows where it grows, wild and stubborn as desert flowers after rain. Daniel had died wanting her to live, had spent his last breath asking his friend to make sure she found love again. And James had loved her, truly, deeply, even if he'd built that love on a foundation that couldn't support its weight. The question wasn't whether she could forgive him. The question was whether she could forgive herself for loving a man that reminded her that hearts keep beating even after they break. 3 months later, a rider appeared on the horizon. Same horse, same man, but different somehow, like he'd ridden through his own reckoning and come out the other side. James didn't come to the house. He stopped at the property line and waited, giving her the choice. Martha walked out to meet him, Daniel's letter folded in her pocket, where she'd carried it every day since then. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she said. "I don't know if I deserve you to. And I don't know if loving you is honoring Daniel's memory or betraying it." James looked at her with eyes that had learned something about truth in the months away. "Your husband saved my life so I could live it, not drown in guilt. And he loved you enough to want you happy, even if that meant letting you go." He paused. "Maybe the way we honor him is by not letting his death rob us of the life he died to protect." Martha stood there, the frontier wind pulling at her hair, 2 ghosts and 1 living man all waiting for her answer. "It won't be easy," she said finally. "No. I'll need time and truth. No more secrets, no matter how much they hurt. I have your word. And some days I'll look at you and see the man who lived when Daniel died, and I'll need you to understand that's part of what I carry. I understand. And she took a breath, let it out, made her choice. Then come home, James. But come home as the man you should have been from the start, honest and imperfect, and willing to earn back what was lost. He dismounted, walked toward her, and when he reached for her hand, she took it, not because the past was forgotten, but because the future was still unwritten. Sometimes redemption doesn't look like we expect. Sometimes it's messy and complicated and built on the ruins of what came before. But that doesn't make it less real. That doesn't make love less worth fighting for. Because in the end, the frontier teaches us this. You can't build a life on lies, no matter how pretty they look in lamplight. Truth might burn when it comes out, might scar you in ways that never fully heal. But it's the only foundation strong enough to hold love when the storms come. And storms always come. But if you can weather them together, with honesty, with grace, with the understanding that we're all carrying weight we didn't choose, then maybe, just maybe, you can find a kind of peace that doesn't erase the past, but makes room for the future. Daniel had died asking James to take care of Martha, and maybe in his own broken way, that's exactly what he'd been trying to do. Not by deceiving her, but by loving her through the grief he'd helped create. The frontier doesn't offer easy answers, but it offers this: a chance to choose who you become after the worst has happened. A chance to forgive not because the wrong disappears, but because carrying it forever will kill you slower than any bullet. Martha and James walked back to the cabin together. Two people learning to build something honest on ground that had been scorched by loss. It wouldn't be the same as what came before. It would be something else entirely. Something earned instead of given. Something fragile and fierce and real. And maybe that was enough.
If this tale found its way into your heart and made you think about the weight we all carry, about the lies we tell ourselves, and about the redemption we sometimes don't think we deserve, then don't ride off into the sunset just yet. There are more stories waiting out here under these wide frontier skies. Stories of love that tests you, betrayal that breaks you, and lessons learned the hard way when the desert wind strips away everything but truth. Stories about real people making hard choices when there are no easy answers. Subscribe to Frontier Love Tales, where every story reminds us that love isn't always pretty, but it's always worth the fight. Where we learn that the heart's the wildest frontier of all, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is forgive, not just others, but yourself. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep riding together. There are more tales to tell, more lessons to learn, and more proof that even in the hardest territory, love still finds a way. Until next time, may your trails be true and your heart stay open, even when it's been broken. This is Frontier Love Tales, where love rides on.